Hey, my name is Kaylee. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. This is Read Rant Review, where, you guessed it, I read books and I do rant reviews. Basically, that means I'm going to be giving you a chapter by chapter, beat by beat breakdown of a book that I read recently. Today's book being that of This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal El-Motar and Max Gladstone. This was personally a 5-star read for me, so I am beyond excited to talk about it. If you have watched any of my other videos on this channel, usually it's like 1 or 2-star reads that I tell you all about so you don't have to read it. Versus this one, I highly recommend that you do read it. Whether you watch my video before or after reading, I think there's so much to get out of this. And really, I'm just making this video so I can gush about my most recent 5-star. So what is it about, if you're wondering? I'll go ahead and read you the back of it real quick, and then we'll talk about marketing and what I thought it was going to be versus what it actually is. In the ashes of a dying world, Red finds a letter marked "Burn before reading." So begins an unlikely correspondence between two rival agents in a war that stretches through the vast reaches of time and space. Red belongs to the agency, capitalized, a post-singularity technotopia. Blue belongs to Garden, also capitalized, a single vast consciousness embedded in all organic matter. Their pasts are bloody and their futures mutually exclusive. They have nothing in common, save that they're the best, and they are alone. Now, what began as a battlefield at boast grows into a dangerous game, one both Red and Blue are determined to win. Because winning's what you do in a war, isn't it? This book was published in 2019, and currently on Goodreads, it is sitting at a 3.87 with 278,000 reviews. I think it would have a much higher rating if it were marketed correctly, and I don't say that as like a dig to the authors or to the publisher or anything like that. But when I first heard about this, what I expected, what I was told, was that this was a sci-fi sapphic romance. Sign me up. What I really got was a poetic sapphic romance in a sci-fi setting, which is also phenomenal and I loved, but not what I expected. You go into this book, you're entered into a time war. You never learn what the war is about, what the end goal is, how it started, how do they time travel, how does anything in the world work? Nothing. This book is more about the poetic, poignant love story between two women rather than developing a like sci-fi world. I hope that makes sense. But I personally, I saw the cover. I love birds. I love sci-fi. I love women. I love poetry. Everything about this book, I was like, sign me the heck up. I loved it so much that even for this video, I went ahead on Etsy and I bought these, look at these little bird earrings I got. I'll link their shop in the description box below. It's obviously 2 different sets that I just like combined for the sake of this video. It's so cute. They're little handmade guys out in Washington State. Okay. All right. Anyway, before I get into the actual book, a few disclaimers like I usually have. The first one is, spoiler alert, I'm going to be giving you a whole breakdown of the book. The second one is, this review is not for the author. Reviews are for readers. Even though I will be singing its praises, this is not for them, right? This is just for my fellow reader and some commentary, and consider this like a FaceTimey casual book club more than anything like formal. And then the third disclaimer is usually a content or trigger warning that I like to put out there so that you guys know what you're getting into. For this book in particular, there's really nothing bad. It's emotional, obviously, but there's nothing horrendous, especially if you've seen the other videos on this channel. This is very, very lighthearted. So if you're unfamiliar, I have my Spotify linked in the description box below. I upload all of my videos onto there. So just, again, thank you guys so much for everything. I appreciate all of you so much. And I think that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. Most of this will, honest to God, just be me reading you this book. I can't make it clear enough to you that you will not know what's happening. And that's not for like lack of knowledge on your part. It's not for lack of explanation on mine. I think it is truly intentional. You just get thrown into a book. You have to accept it. It is what it is. You're not going to know what's happening. We're here for the vibes. It is truly for the vibes. Hey friends, Editing Kaylee here. Just really quick before we get into the actual video, 2 things I would like to acknowledge. The audio on this video is horrendous. It's not that bad, but it cuts out for higher pitched noises and like when I laugh, which kind of sucks. The whole point of these videos is to have a little giggle with you guys, and it like didn't record very well. So I fixed the audio in videos going forward, but just I didn't want to scrap 3 hours of footage, so just sorry. And then the other thing to acknowledge is the fact that the word commandant gets used quite a bit in this book. Commandant, in case you are unfamiliar, is a military leadership thing. It's pretty much the boss. But I pronounced it as commandant, and then sometimes I would say commandant. Sometimes I would say some other crazy way of pronouncing it. So I would just like to acknowledge I know I'm fucking it up. I know I'm messing a lot of words up actually, and I can't say words. So don't judge me. Okay, that's all. Thanks. Bye. But, okay, let's begin. I'll stop yapping, I promise. I'll go ahead and read you the entirety of the first chapter so that you kind of get what's going on. You get the vibe of the book. When Red wins, she stands alone. Blood slicks her hair. She breathes out steam in the last night of this dying world. That was fun, she thinks. But the thought sours in the framing. It was clean, at least. She's come to knot this strand of history and sear it until it melts. She holds a corpse that was once a man, her hands gloved in its guts, her fingers clutching its alloy spine. She lets go, and the exoskeleton clatters against rock. Crude technology. Ancient. Bronze to depleted uranium. He never had a chance. That is the point of Red. After a mission comes a grand and final silence. Her weapons and armor fold into her like roses at dusk, and heal. In the programmable matter of her clothing knits back together, Red looks, again, something like a woman. She paces the battlefield, seeking, making sure. She has won. Yes, she has won. She is certain that she has won. Hasn't she? Both armies lie dead. Two great empires broke themselves here, each a reef to the other's hull. That is what she came to do. From their ashes, others will rise, more suited to her agency's ends. And yet, there was another on the field, no groundling like the time-worn corpses mounded by her path, but a real player, someone from the other side. Few of Red's fellow operatives would have sensed the opposing presence. Red knows only because Red is patient, solitary, careful. She studied for this engagement. She modeled it backward and forward in her mind. When ships were not where they were supposed to be, when escape pods that should have been fired did not, when certain fuselages came 30 seconds past their cue, she noticed. Twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. But why? Red has done what she came to do, she thinks. But wars are dense with causes and effects, calculations and strange attractors, and all the more so are wars in time. One spared life might be worth more to the other side than all of the blood that stained Red's hands today. A fugitive becomes a queen or a scientist, or worse, a poet. Or her child does. Or a smuggler she trades jackets with in some distant spaceport. And all this blood for nothing. Killing gets easier with practice, in mechanics and technique. Having killed never does, for Red. Her fellow agents do not feel the same, or at least they hide it better. It is not like Garden's players to meet Red on the same field at the same time. Shadows and sure things are more their style. But there is one who would. Red knows her, though they have never met. Each player has their signature. She recognizes patterns of audacity and risk. Red may be mistaken. She rarely is. Her enemy would relish such a magic trick, twisting to her own ends all Red's grand work of murder. But it's not enough to suspect. Red must find proof. So she wanders the charnel field of victory and seeks the seeds of her defeat. A tremor passes through the soil. Do not call it Earth. The planet dies. Crickets chirp. Crickets survive for now among the crashed ships and broken bodies of this crumbling plain. Silver moss devours steels, and violet roses choke the dead guns. If the planet lasted long enough, the vines that sprout from the corpses' mouths would grow berries. It won't, and neither will they. On a span of blasted ground, she finds the letter. It does not belong. Here there should be bodies mounded between the wrecks of ships that once sailed the stars. Here there should be death and dirt and blood of a successful op. Overhead, ships aflame in orbit. There should not be a sheet of cream-colored paper, clean save a line and long trailing hand, burn before reading. Red likes to feel. It is a fetish. Now she feels fear and eagerness. She was right. She searches shadows for her hunter. her prey. She thirsts for contact, for a new, more worthy battle, but she is alone with the corpses and the splinters and the letter her enemy left. It is a trap, of course. Vines curl through eye sockets, twine past shattered portholes. Rust flakes like snow, metal creaks, stressed and shatters. It is a trap. Perhaps a virus in the message, to subvert her thoughts, to seed a trigger, or merely to taint Red with suspicion in her commandant's eyes. Perhaps if she reads this letter, she will be recorded, exposed, blackmailed for use as a double agent. The enemy is insidious, even if this is but the opening gambit of a longer game. By reading it, Red risks Commandant's wrath if she is discovered, risks seeming like a traitor, be she never so loyal. The smart and cautious play would be to leave. But the letter is a gauntlet thrown, and Red has to know. She finds a lighter in the dead soldier's pocket. Flames catch in the depths of her eyes, sparks rise, ashes fall, and letters form on the paper in that same long, trailing hand. Red's mouth twists. A sneer, a mask, a hunter's grin. The letter burns her fingers as the signature takes shape. She lets its cinders fall. Red leaves then. Mission failed and accomplished at once, and climbs down thread toward home. To the braided future her agency shapes and guards. No trace of her remains, save cinders, ruins, and millions dead. The planet waits for its end. Vines live, yes, and crickets, though no one's left to see them but the skulls. Rain clouds threaten, lightning blooms, and the battlefield goes monochrome. Thunder rolls. There will be rain tonight, to slick the glass that was the ground, if the planet lasts so long. The letter's cinders die. The shadow of a broken gunship twists, empty it fills. A seeker emerges from that shadow, bearing other shadows with her. Wordless, the seeker regards the aftermath. She does not weep that anyone can see. She paces through the wrecks, over the bodies, professional. She works a winding spiral, ensuring with long practiced arts that no one has followed her through the silent paths she walked to reach this place. The ground shakes and shatters. She reaches what was once a letter, kneeling. She stirs the ashes. A spark flies up, and she catches it in her hand. She removes a thin white slab from a pouch at her side and slips it under the ashes, spreads them against the white, removes her glove and slits her finger. Rainbow blood wells and falls and splatters into gray. She works her blood into the ash to make a dough, kneads that dough, rolls it flat. All around, decay proceeds. The battleships become mounds of moss. Great guns break. She applies jeweled lights and odd sounds. She wrinkles time. The world cracks through the middle. The ash becomes a piece of paper with sapphire ink in a viney hand at the top. This letter was meant to be read once, then destroyed. In the moments before the world comes apart, she reads it again. Okay. So that's the opening of the book. And then we get into the letter and we see what the letter is. And that is the entire setup for the rest of the book. We get a little blurb of opening of Red or Blue finding the letter, and then what the letter actually contains. I think it's fascinating, but the style of writing that I just explained to you is what it is for all of it. It's poetic, it's flowery, you're not really meant to understand what's going on, and you're left with a lot of questions until you read it again and again. This will be my third time going through the book. I read it once for pleasure, I read it second for notes, and then now I'm reading it a third time to record it and send this to you guys. So every time you read it, you get more and more out of it, and it makes more and more sense. It's only 200 pages, so like rereading it's not that crazy of a deal. And now you have a video to like rewatch it to understand what's going on, or watch me and then go read it. Anyway, in short though, to summarize what I just read, because that was like 10 minutes. Red is walking on a battlefield after she had pretty much unalived or led all of these people to be unaliving each other. Red is the best agent on her side, right? The best agent in the agency. She's great at what she does, phenomenal even. And when she senses a presence in the battlefield, she knows exactly who it is. And when she finds a letter left behind by said person, she can't help but burn the letter and figure out what they have to say. What a crazy start to a book. So Blue's letter, same thing. I'll just read it in its entirety so you get a vibe for what's going on. This is significantly shorter than what I just read. Plus, if you're here, you probably like hearing me read. So I'm just going to keep going. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. A little joke. Trust that I have accounted for all variables of irony. Though I suppose if you're unfamiliar with over-anthologized work of the early Strand 6 19th century, the joke's on me. I hoped you'd come. You're wondering what this is, but not, I think, wondering who this is. You know, just as I've known. Since our eyes met during that messy matter on Arbogast 882, that we have unfinished business. I shall confess to you here that I'd been growing complacent, bored even with the war. Your agency's flash and dash, up thread and down, gardens, patient planting and pruning of strands, burrowing into time's braid. Your unstoppable force to our immovable object. Less a game of go than a game of tic-tac-toe. Outcomes determined from the first move. Endlessly iterated until the split where we fork off into unstable, chaotic possibility. The future we seek to secure at each other's expense. But then you turned up. My margins vanished. Every move I'd made by rote, I had to bring myself to fully. You brought some depth to your side's speed, some staying power, and I found myself working at capacity again. You invigorated your shift's war effort, and in doing so, invigorated me. Please find my gratitude all around you. I must tell you, it gives me great pleasure to think of you reading these words in licks and whirls of flame, your eyes unable to work backwards, unable to keep the letters on a page. Instead, you must absorb them, admit them into your memory. In order to recall them, you must seek my presence in your thoughts, tangled among them like sunlight in water. In order to report my words to your superiors, you must admit yourself already infiltrated, another casualty of this most unfortunate day. This is how we'll win. It is not entirely my intent to brag. I wish you to know that I respected your tactics. The elegance of your work makes this war seem less of a waste. Speaking of which, the hydraulics in your spherical flanking gambit were truly superb. I hope you'll take comfort in the knowledge that they'll be thoroughly digested by our mulchers, such that our next victory against your side will have a little piece of you in it. Better luck next time, then. Fondly, Blue. Okay, right? So, two things to note before we move forward. There was mention of attractors and chaos, and this is probably the only time in my entire like YouTube career that I will be able to bring up one of my tattoos with relevancy. So I have, if you're not watching, it's the Lorenz attractor. It's like the graphical representation of the what is known in pulp culture as the butterfly effect, the Lorenz attractor, the chaos theory, the butterfly effect. All of it stems from this idea from Lorenz, which is if you change even slightly the initial conditions, it is unpredictable what the end results will be in these like strange chaotic systems. It is incredibly fascinating. I've always loved the idea of the butterfly effect. In case you are unaware of what that means, essentially, if a butterfly were to flap its wings in Brazil, could it cause a tornado in Texas? If you change one little thing, what is the great impact that it will have in the future? It has been very watered down and kind of misinterpreted by pulp culture. Like, what a niche math reference on top of all of the other things that I listed that I loved. Truly, this book was made for me, dude. Anyway, so into chapter 2, we get Blue finding Red's response to her previous letter. Blue is in a hospital on a mission to try and infect a doctor with a new strain of bacteria in order to unalive said doctor. When she gets to the hospital, though, it's entirely cleared out of people. She has failed her mission. And in its place, she finds a like jar of water and a note next to it that says read by bubbling. Once she puts it through the MRI machine, the water, once it's hot, somehow transforms into numbers. Blue, it's like data that Blue can somehow read, and it becomes the letter from Red. I wish I could tell you more than that, truly, but it, again, you're kind of meant to not understand what's happening. I will read Red's response so you can get a feel for her. It is such drastically different ways that these letters are written that I find it fascinating, and I think it really lends to the credit of having two entirely different authors writing this. It is such a clear and different vibe between reading letters from Red or from Blue. So I will read you Red's first letter now. My most insidious Blue. How does one begin this sort of thing? It's been so long since I started a new conversation. We're not so isolated as you are, not so locked in our own heads. We think in public. Our notions inform one another, correct, expand, reform, which is why we win. Even in training, the other cadets and I knew one another as one knows a childhood dream. That's such a great sentence. I'd greet comrades I thought I'd never met before, only to find that we had crossed paths in some strange corner of the cloud before we knew who we were. So, I am not skilled in taking up correspondence, but I have scanned through enough books and indexed enough examples to essay the form. Most letters begin with a direct address to the reader. I've done that already. So next comes shared business. I'm sorry that you couldn't meet the good doctor. She's important. More to the point, her sister's children will be, if she visits them this afternoon and they discuss patterns in birdsong, which she will have done already by the time that you decipher this note. My cunning methods for spirituring her from your clutches? Engine trouble. A good spring day. A suspiciously effective and cheap remote access software suite her hospital purchased 2 years ago, which allows the good doctor to work from home. Thus, we braid strand 6 to strand 9, and our glorious crystal future shines so bright I gotta wear shades, as the prophets say. Remembering our last encounter, I thought it best to ensure you twist no other groundlings to your purpose, hence the bomb threat. Crude, but effective. I appreciate your subtlety. Not every battle's grand, not every weapon fierce. Even we who fight wars through time forget the value of a word in the right moment, a rattle in the right car engine, a nail in the right horseshoe. It's so easy to crush a planet that you may overlook the value of a whisper to a snowbank. Are you kidding me? Address the reader. Done. Discuss shared business. Done. Almost. I imagine you laughing at this letter in disbelief. I have seen you laugh, I think, in the ever victorious army's ranks as your dupes burned the summer palace, and I rescued what I could of the Emperor's marvelous clockwork devices. You marched scornful and fierce through the halls, hunting an agent you did not know was me. So I imagine fire glinting off your teeth. You think you've wormed inside of me, planted seeds or spores in my brain, whatever vegetable metaphor suits your fancy. But here, I've repaid your letter with my own. Now we have a correspondence, which, if your superiors discover it, will start a chain of questions I anticipate you'll find uncomfortable. Who's infecting whom? We know from our horse Trojans in my time. Will you respond, establishing complicity, continuing our self-destructive paper trail just to get in the last word, leaving my note to spin its fractal math inside of you? I wonder which I'd rather. Finally, conclude. This was fun. My regards to the vast and trunkless legs of stone, Red. I'm sorry. Excuse me? What is happening? Other than pure and unadulterated immediate tension. This is crazy. And it's written I love the poetic elements so far. I was hooked immediately, and it's so unique, and it's a unique take, and like I said, you will never understand any more than what I have explained so far. And if your response is, Kaylee, I don't know, WTF is happening, that's the point, my guy. That's what I'm saying. You're not supposed to. This is a poignant love story with a sci-fi backdrop. Don't expect to know anything more. You literally just have to accept what I'm telling you, feel it in your heart, and press on. That's all we can do. And it's so good. Okay, here out, I'm going to summarize significantly more, and I'll just mostly be reading you points that I think are particularly beautiful or particularly worthwhile. So in chapter 3, we open with Red navigating through a labyrinth with a bunch of pilgrims. They are paying homage to a ancient god. She has her mission. She takes care. She should meet no opposition as she makes a small twist this far up thread. At the labyrinth's heart, there's a cavern. And soon into that cavern will come a gust of wind, and if that wind whistles over the right fluted bones, one pilgrim will hear the cry as an omen that will drive him to renounce all worldly goods and retreat to build a hermitage on a distant mountain slope. So that hermitage will exist in 200 years to shelter a woman fleeing with her child in a storm, and so it goes. Start a stone rolling, so in 3 centuries you'll have an avalanche. Little flash to such an assignment, less challenge, so long as she stays on script. Not even a taunt to disturb her path. Well, as you can imagine, it does not go very well. She gathers bones and she hangs them, but ultimately she fails her mission because she doesn't build the bones in time. The sound never comes. The omen to the pilgrim never comes, and the hermitage is never created. But in her failure, she cuts the bones down, and as they fall into the pit, A noise is made. And in the sound, a rush of wind splits the earth, a roar in darkness. Red clutches the petrified trunk closer than a lover. The wind peaks, screams, tosses bones about. A new note rises above the oscillatory clatter. Woken by the cavern's wind whistling over precise fluted pits in the bones Red has hung. The note grows, shifts, and swells into a voice. Red listens, teeth bared in an expression that, if she were it mirrored, she could not name. There's awe there, yes. And fury. What else? She scans the lightless cavern. She detects no heat signature, no movement, no radar ping, no EM emissions or cloud trail. Of course not. She feels gloriously exposed, ready for the gunshot or the moment of truth. Too soon, the wind dies and the voice with it. Red curses into the silence, remembering the era. She invokes local fertility deities, frames inventive methods for their copulation. She exhausts her invective arsenal and growls, wordless, and spits into the abyss. After all of that, as prophesized, she laughs. Thwarted, bitter, but still, there's humor in it. Before she leaves, Red saws free the bones she hung. The pilgrim Red meant to shape is gone, and the hermitage will be unbuilt. Now Red will have to fix this mess to the best of her ability. The abandoned bones tumble and fall. But don't worry, the seeker catches them before they land. Okay. So the voice in the wind that she heard was Blue's. It was Blue's next letter, which opens by saying, Dear Red, in tooth, in claw. She says, You were right that I laughed. Your letter was very welcome. It told me a great deal. You imagined the fire glinting off of my teeth. Knowing your fine attention to detail, I thought I'd put a little devil in it. Perhaps I ought to begin with an apology. This is not, I'm afraid, the omen that you were anticipating. While you listen to my words, you might give a little thought to whose bones were cored and pocked with this letter. That poor pilgrim who might have been. Why leave a self-destructing paper trail when one can enjoy an asset-destroying scrimshaw session and let the wind take a turn tickling some ivory? What are these sentences? Okay, hey, I didn't say this earlier. I'll interrupt right now. I love books that make me feel stupid. Hot take. I love reading a book that I have no idea what's going on, that I have to reread multiple times because it means it's unique. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. There's been a couple books that were just, I didn't understand because they were bad. But oftentimes when I read a book and I don't know what the frick is going on, that is when I have the most fun reading that I've had in a very, very long time. It challenges me. It makes me think outside of the box. It makes me have a good time and I don't know what to expect. And so often, especially in the books, if you've watched a lot of reviews on my channel, so often you can predict what happens. Like you can almost read the title, read the back of the book, and you can write out exactly what happens in it. So very few times have I been genuinely surprised or taken aback or not knowing what's happening or what's going to happen. And so when it does, when I read books like this and it feels good, I like feeling stupid. I like being challenged in such a way. Anyway, continuing. Don't worry. He lived a fine life first, not the life that you would have wanted for him, perhaps. Unhappy but useful to posterity, harboring the vulnerable, dimpling the future's punch cards, one new life at a time. Instead of building a hermitage, he fell in love, made glorious music with his fellow, traveled widely, grew tears from an emperor, melted her hard heart, bumped history out of one groove and into another. Strand 22 crosses strand 56, if I'm not mistaken, and somewhere down the thread, a bud's bloomed bright enough to taste. It flatters me to find you so attentive. Be assured that I'll have looked long and hard at you while you assembled my little art project. Will you go still and turn sharply when you know that I'm watching you? Will you see me? Imagine me waving. In case you don't. I'll be too far off for you to see my mouth. Just kidding. I'll be long gone by the time that the wind turns right. Made you look, though, didn't I? I imagine you laughing, too. I look forward to your reply, Blue. The tension, I love it so. In chapter 4, Blue attempts to hack into a machine to release a particular virus, but upon doing so, she thinks that she cracks the code, and as she's about to like pull the computer away, a message from Red appears on the screen, and she realizes that she has failed her mission. When she leaves only dust behind, but a seeker appears and gathers up every bit of it. The seeker is such a creepy little creeper. Throughout the whole book, I was like, this thing is horrifying. Like I was so scared the entire time that the seeker was like collecting bits and pieces of their letters and love story to report them, and they were going to get found out, and it was going to be this like horrendous ending because the seeker compiled all of these pieces together, right? I will not confirm nor deny my belief. I'm just telling you what I was thinking at this point in the story, okay? So in Red's letter, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to read you all of the letters. I'll just summarize how they find them, but I'm just going to read you the letters for the most part because this is so fun to me. Dearest Blue Dabadi, a daring intrusion. Mad props. I never would have believed your party would risk working strand 8827 this far down thread until I recognized your distinctive signature. I shudder to imagine an equal and opposite incursion. May causality forbid commandant ever dispatch me to one of your vine-hivy elf worlds, profusely floral, all arcing elder trees, neural pollen, and bees gathering memories from eyes and tongue, honey libraries dripping knowledge from the comb. I harbor no illusions I'd succeed. You would find me in an instant, crush me faster. I'd walk a swath of rot through your verdancy. No matter how light I tried to step, I have a Cherenkov green thumb. I know. Cherenkov's radiation, well, blue. Never let facts break a good joke. What? But you're subtle. I barely heard the signs of your approach. I won't tell you what they were, for reasons you'll understand. Imagine me, if you want, crouched atop a stairwell, knees to chin, out of sight, counting the burglar's footfalls as she climbs. You're not half bad at this. Did they grow you for this purpose? How does your side handle this sort of thing, anyway? Did they engender you knowing you'd be? Did they train you, run you through paces at what I can only picture as some sort of horrific summer camp under the watchful eyes of concerned counselors who smile all the time? Did your bosses send you here? Do you even have bosses? Or a queen? Might someone in your chain of command want to do you wrong? I ask because we could have trapped you here. This strands a prominent tributary. Commandant could field a swarm of agents without much of a casual risk. I imagine you reading this, thinking you would have escaped them all. Maybe. But those agents are busy elsewhere, and it would have been a waste of time to recall them and dispatch again. Rather than bother Commandant with something I could handle on my own, I interceded directly. Easier for both of us. Of course, I couldn't let you steal those poor people's god. We don't need this place in specific, but we need something like it. I'm sure you can picture the work required to rebuild such a paradise from scratch, or even recover its gleam from the wreckage. Think for a second. If you succeeded, if you stole the physical object on whose slow quantum decomposition this, oh my God, if you stole the physical object on whose slow quantum decomposition this strand's random number generators depend, if that triggered a cryptographic crisis, if that crisis led people to distrust their food printers, if hunger masses rioted, if riots fed this glitter into the fires of war, we'd have to start again, cannibalizing other strands, likely from your braid. And then we'd be at one another's throats even more. Plus, this way I can repay you for that trick in the catacombs, with a note of my own. But I'm almost out of room. You like the Strand 6 19th century. Well, Mrs. Levitt's Guide to Etiquette and Correspondence, London, Gooseneck Press, Strand 61, suggests I should end by recapitulating my letter's main thrust, whatever that means. So here it goes. Ha ha, blueser. Your mission, objectives, in another castle. Hugs and kisses, Red. P.S. The keyboard's coated with slow-acting contact poison. You'll be dead in an hour. P.P.S. Just kidding. Or am I? P.P.S. I'm just screwing with you, but postscripts sure are fun. Oh my goodness gracious. So, what does any of the words that I just said mean? In short, nothing. Truly, it just means that they're just gonna go back and forth and keep trying to sabotage each other's missions, to change the timelines, to do something in the future to affect whatever their side's greater goal is. We don't know what the greater goal is. I'm just here for the flirting. How funny is it that you can tell the tone of a letter like that, and you can feel the tension and the flirtation when it's almost spoken in an entirely different language. That's so hot. Like that's so cool. I feel like I'm nerding out so hard. In chapter 5, Red is helping Genghis Khan gather trees with his army to like sustain them through the winter. And as they're cutting down trees for fire, they cut down one. She finds a letter in the rings of the tree, written in an alphabet that nobody at the time knows other than Red. Hello? So she tells them to burn it down. She like reads it, commits it to memory, and has them burn the tree to burn the evidence. And then, of course, many years later, when Red is gone, the seeker comes to gather all of the splinters left of the tree that they cut down, the tree that contained Blue's letter, and it consumes the splinters. So the letter from Blue, though, my perfect Red. How many boards would the Mongols hoard if the Mongol horde got bored? Perhaps you'll tell me once you're finished with this strand. The thought that you could have trapped me, stranded me, perhaps. Oh dear, sorry, not sorry, is so delicious that I confess myself quite overcome. Do you always play things safe then? Run the numbers so precisely that you can reject out of hand any scenario that has a projected success rate of less than 80%? It grieves me to think you'd make a boring poker player. But then I imagine you'd cheat, and that's a comfort. I'd never want you to let me win. The very idea. I wore goggles, but imagine, please, the widening of my eyes at your sweet interrogation in strand 8827. Did my bosses send me there? Do I have bosses? A suggestion of corruption in my command chain, a charming concern for my well-being. Are you trying to recruit me, dear cochineal? Okay, so a cochineal is a tiny little red insect thing. And then we'd be at each other's throats even more. Oh, Petal, you say that like it's a bad thing. Flirting, I can't. I love yearning. It occurs to me to dwell on what a microcosm we are in a war as a whole, you and I, the physics of us, an action and an equal and opposite reaction. My viney, hivey elf world, as you say, versus your techie, mechy dystopia. We both know it's nothing so simple. Any more than a letter's reply is its opposite. But which egg preceded what platypus? The ends don't always resemble our means. But enough philosophy. Let me tell you what you have told me, speaking plain. You could have killed me, but didn't. You have acted without the knowledge or sanction of your agency. Your vision of life in garden is sufficiently full of silly stereotypes to read as a calculated attempt at provoking a stinging, unguarded response. Hilarious, given how long it took me to grow these words, but spoken with such keen beauty as to suggest a confession of real, curious ignorance. We do have superb honey, best eaten in a thickness of comb spread on a warm bread with soft cheese in a cool part of the day. Do your kind eat anymore? Is it all tubes and intravenous nutrition, metabolisms optimized for far strand food? Do you sleep, Red? Or dream? Let me also speak plain. Before this tree runs out of years, before the fine fellows under your command make siege weapons of my word. What do you want from this, Red? What are you doing here? Tell me something true or tell me nothing at all. Tell me something true or tell me nothing at all? Best. Blue. P.S. I'm touched by the research effort expended on my behalf. Mrs. Levitt's guide is a good one. Now that you've discovered postscripts, I look forward to what you could do with scented inks and seals. P.P.S. There's no trick here. No thwart. Give my best to this strand's Genghis. We lay on our backs and watched clouds together when we were young. I'm sorry. Again, excuse me? What are you talking about? Oh my God. I feel like I literally cannot explain to you guys how beautiful this is. Like, get it, you get it, and if you don't, you don't. I can't even begin to explain to you any of this. But in chapter 6, Blue is on a ship surrounded by icy water, and she sees a seal in the distance that has her name on it. She kills the animal, the seal, and when she opens it, there's a letter from Red. So like kind of a play on words of last time, talking about how she can't wait for Red to understand seals. She finds one, like a animal, not an ink. You know what you know what I'm saying, not a wax one. Anyway, she finds it and she opens up this letter. The only thing though to note, I think of that from that like portion that I've highlighted is 7 strands tangle on the collapse or survival of this fishery. insignificant to some eyes, everything to others. Some days, Blue wonders why anyone would ever bother making numbers so small. Other days, she supposes even infinity needs to start somewhere. Again? I'm sorry. What? The letter that she finds from Red says, "My dear Mood Indigo, it's been a long time from my perspective, and I'm afraid yours, since your letter. I had another decade or so with Genghis, who says hi, by the way. He told me the most interesting stories about you, or I assume it was you. After action reports following, and after those, I had the usual sort of routine rebraiding dance." She goes on, Red writes very, very long letters and they're very cute and beautiful. I want you to be able to read them and get something out of it. So I don't want to tell you everything in the book, right? But in the letter, she also says, "There's a kind of time travel in letters, isn't there? I imagine you laughing at my small joke. I imagine you groaning. I imagine you throwing my words away. Do I still have you? Do I address empty air and the flies that will eat this carcass? You could leave me for 5 years. You could return never. And I have to write the rest of this not knowing. I prefer read receipts, all things considered. The instant handshake of slow telepathy through our wires. But this is a fascinating technology in its limits. You ask if we eat. It's a hard question to answer. There is no mono we. There are many us's. The us's change and interleave. Have you ever stared into the workings of a watch? I'm talking about a really, really good watch. If you want to see what I mean, climb down thread to the 33rd century CE Ghana. Limited, unlimited in Accra does wonderful pieces with translucent nanoscale gears, no larger than grains of sand, teeth invisibly small, actions and counteractions and complications. They break like a kaleidoscope and they keep good time. There's one of you, but so many of us. Pieces layered atop pieces, each with its own traits, desires, purposes. One person may wear different faces in different rooms. Minds swap bodies for sport. Everyone is anything they want. The agency imposes a modicum of order. So, do we eat? I do. I don't need to. We grow in our pods, our basic knowledge flashed in cohort by cohort, nutrient balance maintained by the gel bath, and there most of us stay, our minds flitting disembodied through the void from star to star. We live through remotes, explore through drones, the physical world but one of many, and uninteresting by comparison to most. Some do decant and wander, but they can sustain themselves for months on a charge. And there's always a pod to go back to if you want it. She goes on to talk about how the agents, like people similar to her that are doing all of these time traveling missions, have even less of a need to eat. Like they've been programmed in such a way that like nutrients aren't necessary for them. But she then goes on to describe eating syrup and blueberry pancakes and how she loves to eat, probably too much. I seldom can in public, back at the agency. Commandant starts asking questions if you do. Jaunts up thread to places where they eat all the time. Feel decadent. How about you? I don't mean necessarily how do you eat, though if you want to fill me in, be my guest. Your descriptions of honey and bread. Thank you for that. I've described a bit our overlapping models, communities public and private, shared interests, shared senses. What's it like to be part of yours? Do you have friends, Blue? And how? You asked me to tell truths. I have. What do I want? Understanding. Exchange. Victory. A game hiding and discovery. You're a swift opponent, Blue. You play long odds. You run the table. If we're to be at war, we might as well entertain one another. Why else did you taunt me at the start? Yours, Red. P.S. Cochineal. I get it now. It's the little red bug from earlier. I'm probably pronouncing a lot of words wrong. I never said I was smart. In chapter 7, Red is at the volcano in Atlantis, trying to protect the village from the lava spewing out from it. If there is one thing across all of the times, she hates Atlantis, every variation of it, and so does Blue. I don't know. So as she's trying to protect the village, she gets distracted by the lava because she finds a letter from Blue within the lava. And then, of course, the seeker comes and gathers up the fine hairs of the molten volcanic glass that form near the lava flows. Again, the seeker scares the ever-loving crap out of me. But in Blue's letter that was written in the lava, she says, "My careful cardinal, let me tell you a secret. I loathe Atlantis. Every single Atlantis across all strands. It's a putrid thread. Everything you've likely been taught about garden and my shift. I don't know what the shift is, by the way. They've said it before. I have no idea. Should lead you to believe we treasure it as a bastion of good works, the original Platonic ideal for how civilization ought to be. How many bright-eyed adolescents have poured the fervor of their souls into lives imagined there? Magic, infinite wisdom, unicorns, the gods themselves made flesh. The work we do to maintain these notions is more subtle than you might think. But what a dreary place. Stagnant, sick as a sucking wound, a successful experiment with disgusting result. The volcano was the best thing to ever happen to it. Now it's legend, possibility, mystery, a far more generative engine than anything it developed over a few thousand years. That's what we treasure. That's us. Always. The volcano and the wave. Thank you for your words on eating. After weeks of ship biscuits, they were especially welcome. I should tell you, as Mrs. Levitt would, that it's customary to send letters that can be opened without ruining the seal. But I appreciate your innovation more than I can say. What I can say, it was very cold out on the ice. Your letter warmed me. Okay. You talk of ideographic signatures and operational security brought to mind some grooming work I did among a few strands worth of Bess of Hardwick's botanists. While there, it was my pleasure to observe correspondence between them and their lady, just how layered and complex plain speech could be, how many secrets wrapped in the banner of sincerity, a word commonly invented in the 16th centuries. Even that ideographic signature could easily be a lie, of course. Counterfeit stamps, sealed letters hidden under separate cover, the wrong color of wax or silk flossing. How much glorious double talk could take place while Mary, Queen of Scots, was under her roof? I assure you that cryptography pales in comparison. Imagine a cipher made up of interlocking moods shifting in response to environmental stimuli. I know that the last paragraph that I just read to you made no sense, but I cannot repeat to you how critical that is to the story, okay? All of this might seem so random and unimportant, but I swear to God, it all ties together. It might not make sense, but by God, does it all tie together? Also, standardized spelling wasn't yet a feature of English. We make so much of lettercraft literal, don't we? Whacked seals aside. Letters as time travel, time traveling letters, hidden meanings. I wonder what you see me saying here. Absent from your mention of food, so sweet, so savory, was any mention of hunger? You spoke of the lack of need. Yes, no lion in pursuit, no animalistic procreative desperation. But these lead to enjoyment, certainly. But hunger is a many splendored thing. It needn't be conceived only in limbic terms in biology. Hunger, read, to satiate a hunger or to stoke it, to feel hunger as a furnace, to trace its edges like teeth, is a thing you singingly know. Have you ever had a hunger that whetted itself on what you fed it, sharpened so keen and bright that it might split you open, break a new thing out? Sometimes I think that's what I have instead of friends. I hope it isn't too hard to read this. Best I could do on short notice. I hope it reaches you before the island breaks around you. Write to me in London next. Blue. I'm sorry. Excuse me? So in summary, just very shortly at the end, Blue is talking about the importance and the history of cryptography and hiding letters within letters. And then also saying that hunger isn't just like the literal biological, I need food hunger, but hunger as a, not tenet of your being, what would you call it? Like an emotional hunger, like a need for anything, for everything. Just the idea of needing something and wanting it so badly. Okay. In chapter 8, it's the same day, month, year, but one strand over. And Blue is in London. It's the kind of London that other Londons dream. It's sepia tinted and beautiful, mannered as a novel, filthy only where story requires it. All meat pies and monarchy. This is a place Blue loves and hates herself for loving. She goes to a tea shop. When she orders the tea, the server brings it out, but the teacup and the saucer in which it came with don't match. And when she says something to the waiter apologizes and says that all the other ones are taken and all that's left, the other pieces were broken, so this is what she had to combine. And as she goes to spin her tea, there's a substance from up thread, and so she knows that it's a letter from Red. So she tells the like hostess person that it's fine, or the waitress, whatever, whoever says it's fine, and she stirs it into her tea and she sips it. And as she sips her tea, she consumes Red's letter. Okay. Once she reads the letter, she drops the saucer and the teacup to the ground and like squishes it under her boot into a powder. The seeker then comes, rolls up a piece of paper, and like snorts the powder from the ground and consumes it. What in the hell? So, Red's letter to her, right, before she destroyed it, it read, Dearest 0000FF, which is the hex code for blue. Red could not remember the name for the blue that she wanted to say, so she gave the hex code. Goes on to agree that Atlantis sucks. I wonder in that light how much of your work has helped me and the other way around, a question beyond my calculative capacity. I'd ask the Chaos Oracle, but I have enough trouble with higher ups at present. I had to step fast under your last letter caught me napping. Commandant wanted explanations. A commandant tends to. After the sinking island took so many treasures with it. A brief lapse in efficiency, according to the agency's models, but well within tolerance considering my track record. But added to the inroads your sides made against our more exposed deep-covered teams, well, I shouldn't talk shop. What a bore, your tea salon pals would say. Okay, so to be clear what that means, she was supposed to say, Red was supposed to save all of Atlantis, got distracted by Blue's letter and was only able to save like the most important people, and then the rest of it sank. And so her people, the agency, did research to figure out what happened, and they were like, okay, well, it was just like an accident, like shit happens pretty much. But really she was distracted by Blue's letter. Okay. She goes on to talk a little bit more and says, Mrs. Levitt suggests relying on metaphors, one's correspondent. Then she goes on to say, you ask about hunger. You ask in particular about my hunger. The short answer is no. The longer answer is I don't think so. We satiate needs before they strike. In this body, an organ, a designed, implanted, rigorously tested organ, seated somewhere above my stomach, registers the moment my metabolism requires fuel and stops the lizard-brained old subsystems that would make me keen and irritable and blunt my thoughts. All those tricks Dame Evolution plays to make us hunters, killers, seekers, and finders and gorgers. I can disable the organ when I must, but it's so much more stable to receive a status report than to feel weak. But the hunger you describe, that blade jutting from the skin, the weathering as of a hillside often struck by storm, the hollowness, it sounds beautiful and familiar. When I was a girl, I loved reading, an archaic pastime, I know. The index and download are faster, more efficient, offering superior retention and acquisition of knowledge. But I read antique volumes handed down and fresh replicated books. How strange to uncover things in sequence. And so I read a comic book once about Socrates. In the comic book, he was a soldier. He was. That part's true. I asked him. And one night, as his fellows lay down to sleep, he started thinking. He stood immobile, lost in thought until the dawn, at which instant he found the answer to his question. It all seemed very romantic to me at the time. So I left my pod and wandered up thread and far away, far from the chatter and the mutual observation. I found a hilltop on a small world, breathable but barren, and I stood there like Socrates in the comic book, lost in thought, weight on one foot. And I did not move. The sun set, the stars rose. They are a rose, right? Or something. Dante said that. I realized that as my ears grew used to the silence, I could still hear the others. Our chatter swarmed the heavens, our voices echoed from the stars. This was not how Socrates stood. My isolation, my experiment, had caused a small sensation among those who cared for me, and for whom I cared. And that sensation spread. Lenses and eyes turned upon me. I was, I think, 13. I received suggestions, philosophy textbooks, meditation guides, offers of practice and alliance. They crowded round, whispers in my ears. Are you okay? Do you need help? You can talk to us. You always can. There were tears. Other organs mind that process too, weeping. They keep our eyes clear and our minds sharp, but chemistry is chemistry. Cortisol, cortisol. It feels harder to write than it should. It feels easier to write than it should as well. I'm contradicting myself. The geometers would be ashamed. I sent them away. Each being's entitled to her privacy, so I refused to let them see me. I was the only person on that tiny rock, and I made the world go dark. Wind blows. High places grow cold at night. Sharp rocks hurt my feet. For the first time in 13 years, I was alone. I, whatever I was, whatever I am, tumbled first up into the stars, then down to the broken land. I dug into the soil. Night birds called, something like a wolf, but solitary and larger, with 6 legs and double banked eyes, padded past. The tears dried, and I felt lonely. I missed those voices. I missed the minds behind them. I wanted to be seen. That need dug into the heart of me. It felt good. I'm not certain how to compare this to something that you would know, but imagine a person melded to a thing, an artificial god the size of mountains, built for making war in the far corners of the cosmos. Imagine that great weight of metal all around her, pressing her down, giving her strength. Its hoses melded with her flesh. Imagine she shears the hoses off, steps out, frail, sapped, wheat free. I was light, hollowed, hungry. The sun rose. I found no revelation. I'm not Socrates. I know Socrates. I served with Socrates. And you, Senator, but I digress. But I walked on, from that place to another, and from that to another in turn, until years later I came home. And when the commandant found me, slid inside of me, said, "There's work for those like you." I wondered if all agents were like me. They weren't. I found that later. But we're all deviant in our different ways. Is that hunger? I don't know. No friends, though? Blue. That's not at all what I would have thought. I don't know. I suppose we see you all curling around campfires singing old struggle songs. Have you been lonely? I hope the tea's well. I'll look for you next, in a more public forum. Yours, Red. P.S. I hesitate to write this, but I've noticed my letters run long. If you'd rather I grow more concise, I can. I don't want to presume. P.P.S. Apologize for the imprecision of my salutation. I think salutation's what Mrs. Levitt calls that. I forgot the name of the strand 8C19 Londoners gave that shade of blue on the imported porcelain. Would have used it if I remembered. PPPS, we're still going to win. In chapter 9, Red is working amongst a bunch of fishermen, a bunch of sailors, and she is knotting reeds. What does that mean? I don't know. She's just doing some little stuff, little weaving stuff with her hand. And she tries to work faster, but she makes a mistake. And in the mistake, she feels the language in the cord, and she realizes that within this reed is the message from Blue. Again, what does any of it mean? I wish I could tell you. The only thing to really note is when the sun set, she takes the unraveled thread, snips it into lengths, and throws each length into the receding tide. Stars shine into the moon. A dark shape slips along the bright waves and dives, one by one. The seeker gathers the strands and ties them about her wrist, so tight her fingers pale and stiffen. She makes a fist, tenses. Her skin splits beneath the cord and closes over it again. Red, who's waited motionless on the shore since the sundown, sees something like a seal against the waves of light and wonders. Hey, so like, what the fuck? You don't ever know. You don't ever know. Blue's letter that she finds among the strings of her mistakes and this like knotted thing that she's doing. Dear Red Sky at morning, don't shorten your letters. You ask if I've been lonely. I hardly know how to answer. I have observed friendship as one observes high holy days, breathtakingly short, whirlwinds of intimate endeavor, frenzied carousing, the sharing of food, of wine, of honey, compressed, always, and gone as soon as they come. It is often my duty to fall in love convincingly, and certainly I've received no complaints. But that is work, and there are better things of which to write. You say you were 13. You do not. You seem so young to me still, however long ago that may seem like it was to you. My own folk are great gardeners, our games are long and slow, our maturation also. Garden seeds the past with us. Your commandant knows this already, whether or not it's considered need to know for you. We learn from and grow into threads. We treat the past as trellis, coax our vineyard through and around, and harvest is not a word for swiftness. The future harvests us, stomps us into wine, pours us back into the root system in loving libation, and we grow stronger and more potent together. I have been birds and branches. I have been bees and wolves. I have been ether flooding the void between stars, tangling their breath into networks of song. I have been fish and plankton and hummus, and all these have been me. But while I've been enmeshed in this wholeness, they are not the whole of me. The thought of your disembodied network repulses me, but I look at you, Red, and I see much of myself. A desire to be apart. Sometimes, to understand who I am without the rest. And what I return to, the meanness that I know is pure, inescapable self, is hunger, desire, longing, this longing to possess, to become, to break like a wave on a rock and reform and break again and wash away. This is a necessary part of any ecosystem, but it unsettles others. This inability to be satisfied. It is difficult. It is very difficult to befriend where you wish to consume, to find those who, when I ask, do I have you still, when they end a letter with yours, mean it in any substantive way. So I go. I travel farther and faster and harder than most, and I read and I write and I love cities. To be alone in a crowd, apart and belonging, to have distance between what I see and what I am. I am glad to know you love reading. Perhaps you should next write from a library. There's so much I want to recommend. Best. Blue. P.S. Socrates. I wonder if we knew any of the same ones. P.P.S. I kept nodding your name at night, but this salutation seemed wiser. I've learned to take warning from delight. P.P.P.S. Of course, we're still going to win. Okay, hold on. Hold on, I just realized something. I just realized something and I put some pieces together in the book. Okay, that's fine. That's so cute. What did I want to say? Okay, so the part about desire, longing, this longing to possess, to become, it's difficult. It's very difficult to befriend where you wish to consume, to find those who, when they ask, do I have you still, when they end a letter with yours, mean in any substantive way, made me cry the first time that I read this book. I can't put it into words. There were so many pieces of this book that made me feel so much on like a molecular level that I even now cannot really put into words. And again, I return to the fact of like, if you know, you know. But when they end a letter with yours, I don't know if I said it or not, but that's how Red ended her last letter. So that is also what fed into Blue having that type of response is like, hey, don't tell me you're mine unless you're like really, really mine. And again, I don't know. It's just like the yearning and the wanting and the longing and the being alone and finally finding your match, and it's just so cute and it's sad, and I just love this book so much. In chapter 10, Blue is in the form of a wolf-like creature guarding a growing thing, millennia in the making. But she's guarding this thing to have it hatch, like she's protecting the egg in which this will hatch from. But when she looks in the distance, she sees a 13-year-old Red standing on a cliffside, and Blue is overcome with emotion at seeing Red in person, at realizing that she is the wolf that Red spoke about in her last letter, or a couple letters ago, or whatever. And when the thing hatches, Blue eats it. She gets in a fight with it and she tears it apart to protect Red. And she realizes that now she has to do a lot to cover up her mistakes and try and play this off with the garden, that this wasn't she didn't betray them, right? She ends up getting hurt pretty badly, like the monster bird thing attacked her back, but she stands at the edge of the woods and stares at Red, and Red stares at her. She retreats into the cave. She's pretty harmed. She turns into human form and eventually goes up thread to go and heal and get away from the situation. A seeker appears, takes the teeth from the bird that Blue unalived. Why did the bird have teeth? I don't know. Seeker puts the teeth in its mouth and then goes and like licks up all of the blood that Blue had shed in the cave. I don't know, dude. Don't look at me like that. I don't know what's happening. But in doing so, when she goes back to the cave and turns human, before she goes up thread, she finds a letter from Red. And the letter reads, Dear Blue, thank you for saving me, obviously, for starters. I felt you climb down the braid. I am more sensitive to your footsteps, I think, than anyone alive, and everyone is alive somewhere in time. In this letter, she realizes that Blue is the wolf, thanks her for such, and says, I could not have beaten the beast alone. You're more ferocious than I am. I am sorry for invading your privacy and seeing what you were doing, but like, I sensed you on the time threads and followed you, and I witnessed you saving me and wrote this letter. There's like, again, just like crazy, twisty stuff that's happening. Do you look around in turn as you read these lines seeking me? I'm gone, dear Blue, up thread, and you should be as well. We're neither of us safe here, and the longer you remain, the less safe we become. You know the drill. tremors spread from traveler's foot. And though no other spider has grown so attuned to your tread as I have, the others aren't deaf. What a, again? Hey, I've said it a lot. What a banger sentence. I'll have to see your eyes some other time. I leave you a letter sealed in wax, a trace of perfume. Sent for me as a medium. I rarely use it for ornamental purpose. I hope I've selected a fragrance to your taste. I've asked the busboy in London Next for a sample of your tea a few letters back. Brought it to a perfumery in Fon Femme, Strand 7922, C33, if you happen to like the smell. I'll enclose the address below. Worked back and forth for a few years on the proper mix. Anyway, keep this. It's yours. It won't burn when you read the signature. It won't decay faster than any letter one woman in your beloved Strand 6C19 would write to another. The paper's from Wuhan, Song Dynasty, handmade. Leave it in a damp place and it will rot. Mix it in water and you'll have a pulp. Destroy it on your own, in your own way if you want. I won't mind. We all have our observers, and this letter is a knife at my neck if cutting is what you want. Okay, hold on. I have to unpack some things and then I'll continue reading. I'm sorry. She spent years to make a perfume that smells like Blue's favorite Earl Grey tea. I've never read anything more sapphic. I've never read anything that is more a woman loving a woman, attentive to detail, like dedication and love. That made me cry when I first read the book. She spent years making a perfume that smells like her favorite Earl Grey tea. And then to say, hey, this letter won't disintegrate. This letter is a knife at my neck if cutting is what you want. Bro, okay. We're on page 81. What do you mean? It's so hard to move here and reply to your last letter. I can't say precisely what. I'm shaken. You know the edges of old maps that promise monsters and mermaids. Here there be dragons. I do not know what roads lead forward, but your letter hungers for reply. I've read your last missive and reread it in memory as you warned me I would so long ago, preparing myself for a fall. I see you as a wave, as a bird, as a wolf. My wolf, with the 6 legs and double-banked eyes. I try not to think of you in the same way twice. Thinking builds patterns in the brain, and those patterns can be read by one sufficiently determined. And the commandant, sometimes, is sufficiently determined. I think you'd like her. So I change your shape and my thoughts. It's amazing how much blue there is in the world if you look. Your different colors of flame, bismuth burns blue, and cerium, and germanium, and arsenic. See, I pour you into things. I suspect you see me plain by now. Imagine me shifting, uncomfortable, exposed. My way was always the straightforward push in one direction, without hesitation or restraint. I only worried that you might view these long letters as a sign of a simple or desperate mind. I worried maybe you'll laugh, that you'll respond on sufferance. So, let me be clear. I like writing you. I like reading you. When I finish your letters, I spend frantic hours in secret composing my replies, pondering ways to send them. I can trigger any combination of chemical ups and downs with a carefully worded phrase. A factory within me will smelt any drug I seek, but there's a rush in reading and sending against which no drug compares. Speaking of exposed, if you have some grand plan, if the death your masters envisioned for my younger self was too quick and you'd rather see me disassembled from my parts, all you need to do now is drop this letter where some other agent of my faction might find it. I could live with that. Well, not for long and painfully, but you take my meaning. So in this letter, I am yours. So, like, in the last letter, when Blue said people signing off with the letter when I am yours and, like, not wanting it to just be in saying, but in, like, literal sense, like, she wants, like, ownership and possession of people. And so Red responds and says, hey, here's a letter that won't disintegrate. I'm yours. You can end my life if you want to. Okay. So in this letter, I'm yours. Not gardens, not your missions, but yours alone. I am yours in other ways as well. Yours as I watch the world for your signs. Yours as I debate methods, motives, chances of delivery. Yours as I review your words by their sequence, their sound, smell, taste, taking care no one memory of them becomes too worn. Yours. Still, I suspect you will appreciate the token. I'll try for a library next time. I hope you understand my need for a change of plans. Yours, Red. The way I am like giggling and kicking my feet right now, bro. Are you kidding me right now? So in chapter 11, after Red gives this letter to Blue, she just goes to work, like hardcore working. She's jumping strands, she's doing a whole bunch of missions, and she can sense the Seeker, this shadow, following her everywhere as she goes. And she doesn't sleep much anymore. She's like so wrapped up in work and scared to a degree that Blue will sell her out, as she hasn't heard any response from Blue. So she's just like busting her butt, doing all of these missions, but she still senses the Seeker, the shadow. And when Red goes on a mission that involves unaliving people, like burning them alive, which is horrifically tragic, it breaks her. And so she goes up thread to go and hide, and she ends up like sinking herself to the bottom of a lake in some far off place to think about life and try and find that like loneliness and that quiet that she described in the earlier letters. And atop the lake, there are Canadian geese that land. When she eventually comes up to shore, one of the geese approaches her. It puts its head on her shoulder and it leaves two feathers behind. The two feathers compose a letter from Blue. Later, farther south, a great horned owl takes the goose, and the Seeker, weeping, eats its heart. What in the hell? Mostly just want to remind you guys the Seeker is still following them and eating every evidence of these letters between the two of them, okay? It gets more and more scary. So in Blue's letter to Red, she says that she is on a mission where she will be there for decades. She's married a man and has to pretend to love him, and have children and do all of this stuff. And based on the conversations that they will have, he will do great things and it will impact this like whole other thread that her side, that the garden is wanting to develop. It is such a luxury to dwell in these details, to share them with you. I want Red. I want to give you things. Have you ever tasted rose hips in tea or jam? A tart sourness that cleans the teeth, refreshes, smells like a good morning. A mash of rose hips and mint keeps steepling my fingers all day long to keep those scents in my hand. Sumac, too. I think you might like sumac. I find myself naming red things that aren't sweet. Your letter, your last letter. Be certain that I won't drop it where any of your fellows can read it. It's mine. I am careful with what belongs to me. Few things do, you know, belong to me. In garden, we belong to one another in a way that obliterates the term. We sink and swell and bud and bloom together. We infuse garden. Garden spreads through us. But garden dislikes words. Words are abstraction, break off from the green. Words are patterns in the way fences and trenches are. Words hurt. I can hide words so long as I scatter them through my body. To read your letters is to gather flowers from within myself, pluck a blossom here, a fern there, arrange and rearrange them in ways to suit a sunny room. It amuses me to think of liking your commandant. What a strange strand that would be. I keep turning away from speaking of your letter. I feel to speak of it would be to contain what it did to me, to make it small. I don't want to do that. I suppose in some ways I'm more Garden's child than she knows. Even poetry, which breaks language into meaning, poetry ossifies, in time, the way trees do. What's supple, whipping, soft, and fresh grows hard, grows armor. If I could touch you, put my finger to your temple and sink into you the way Garden does, perhaps then I would never. So, this letter instead. I ramble, it seems, when writing to the darkness by hand. How embarrassing. I'm quite certain I've never rambled a day in my life before this. Another thing to give to you. This first, for me. Yours. Blue. P.S. Should this find you near a library, I recommend Travel Light by Naomi Mitchison. It's the same in all strands in which it exists. It might be a comfort to you on the move. I can tell you're moving a lot right now. P.P.S. Thank you for the letter. Okay, I'm sorry. So I immediately looked up Travel Light by Naomi Mitchison. A lot of people downloaded it, and all of the comments say I came here because of This Is How You Lose a Time War. I didn't purchase it, but I do plan on reading it. Like, I do plan on purchasing and reading it. Everybody's comments are saying that it is not anything like this book. It is very vaguely, mostly in like, again, vibes more than anything, but that it is a phenomenally unique read. And so I'm very excited to get my hands on it. I haven't read it yet. But I feel to speak of it would be to contain what it did to me, to make it small. That's what love is, bro. Love is not wanting to talk about it because you can't put it into words. This is so beautiful. So in chapter 12, Blue is still married. Like we said, this is going to be like a decades long mission that she's on to have these conversations with her husband that will benefit the garden's future in some way, like whatever. She is there. And when she's in the woods doing some like household stuff, she looks up and there's an owl. The owl coughs up a pellet. She takes the pellet. When she gets home, she breaks it apart and she finds the letter from Red. I don't know, dude. She goes to read it, and then eventually, some years later, a seeker zips through the area and then gathers up the little bones from the pellet. I would assume people are familiar with like owl pellets, but like owls don't digest everything that they consume, so they like throw it back up. And so like bones and random things will be in this like little compact disc. So she got the letter out of it, left it behind. The seeker eventually came years later and got the rest of what was left over to consume for whatever reason the seeker has to be collecting these weird things, right? In Red's letter to Blue, she says, "Yeah, I have been moving. I write you in a rush. Thank you for your letter. More than I can say, it found me at a moment of hunger. Words can wound, but they're bridges too. Though maybe a bridge can also be a wound. To paraphrase a prophet, letters are structures, not events. Yours gives me a place to live inside. My memories of you spread through millennia, and each highlights you in motion. The picture of you at home, with husband, with rose-hip tea, with sunset and river swells my heart. A stippling of sea skin indicates the whale beneath, or dots of a star shape of a bear light years big. So I trace your life for now from these hints. I imagine you waking, sleeping, watching geese, working hard outside with arms and back and legs and period technology. I will find some sumac when next I'm where it grows. I confess I'm only familiar with the poison variety, which I don't think you mean. Perhaps someday they'll assign us side by side in some small village far up thread, deep cover, each watching each, and we can make tea together, trade books, report home, sanitized accounts of each other's doings. I think I'd still write letters. Even then, I read The Mitchison. Loved it. Though that seems too quick a summary, I get what you mean about words now. Okay, I don't know why that just made me tear up. It hit me, especially the dragons and Odin and the ending. I had a harder time with the Constantinople section. I may be missing some context there, though I can see what place it holds in the book, and the trickery reminds me of pieces of Don Quixote. But the final revelation about the kings and the dragons, yes. Funny how we always thinks of knights as fighting dragons when in fact they work for them. Garden seems to like roots, and this book roots in the rootlessness. Are you a tumbleweed then? A dandelion seed? You are yourself, and so remain, as I remain, yours. Red. P.S. Owls are fascinating creatures, but it's harder than I thought to convince them to take food. Maybe this one didn't trust me. P.S. I don't mean to unnerve you, but are you seeing shadows? I may have picked one up. No proof yet, and I may well be paranoid, but paranoia doesn't mean I'm wrong. Commandant hasn't let on that she suspects anything, at least not yet. Take care. P.P.P.S. Really, that book? In a moment of daring, I commended it to the attention of a few major critics in Strand 623. Hard to generate momentum, but you never know. New strands rise all the time. Send me more. Okay, again, that just makes me want to read the book more and more, and I really wish I did before I did this review, but it is what it is. In chapter 13, Red continues to move super swiftly between timelines and just get a bunch of work done. But at some point, she unalives people, has a bunch of red on her hand, like blood on her hands, and when she goes to the river to wash it off, another Canadian goose approaches her. It has like a satchel around its neck with Blue's signature on it. She opens the satchel and there's 6 sumac seeds inside of it. They could be poison, they could be letters from Blue. Red doesn't know, and this is one of those moments where you just have to trust. She eats 3 of the seeds, she consumes 3 of the letters from Blue, and then she falls asleep. When she wakes up, The satchel is gone, but the seeds are left. And when she goes to chase the shadow that took the satchel, the shadow escapes her. This is the motion. If you're watching visually, this is what's happening in my head as I'm reading all of this. There's a lot happening. I don't know what's happening. Again, you have to like reread this so many times to really get the importance of each of these scenes and to understand what and why anything is happening. So the first letter is just saying how I feel you, the needle of you, dancing up and down thread with breathtaking abandon. I feel your hand in places I've touched. You move so fast, so furious. In your wake, the braid thickens, admits fewer and fewer strands, while garden scowls, thunderclaps, and bids me deepen my work. I like to think of all the ways I could have stopped you were I so inclined. Sometimes I am inclined. Sometimes I sit here stationary and I know you so swift and sure and think I must prove myself her equal again. And the sharp electric ache to stop you just to see you admire me is a kind of needle too. And just the different way in which their sides work, right? The agency is very quick and does things. The garden is literally decades upon decades to rewrite a new strand versus like Red's agency that goes into like change individual threads almost. It's very interesting, but Blue's desire to be a competitor to Red again, and she can't because she's stuck being a married woman for a number of decades, right? God, it's so good. Okay, so that was the first. In the second letter that she reads, you wrote of being in a village up thread together, living as friends and neighbors do, and I could have swallowed this valley whole and still not have satiated my hunger for the thought. Instead, I wick the longing into thread, I pass it through your needle eye and sew it into hiding somewhere beneath my skin and embroider my next letter to you one stitch at a time. Yours. Blue. In the third letter, she says that she's not being followed by a shadow, but I'll send out feelers to see what I can if it's my people. It may well be. Garden's clearly been interested in you since you were small, but I've every confidence in your ability to evade and outmaneuver anyone from my side. Anyone who isn't me. If it's your people, that's more complicated and troubling. Be careful. Yours, Blue. In chapter 14, Blue is braiding grass. Again, she's still married, she's still doing her thing. She's braiding grass, and a bird flies by, drops a damselfly into the nest. She goes over and picks up said damselfly from said nest, and in the wings of it, I think in the wings of it or in something is the letter from Red. And in the letter from Red, she says, my blueprint. I have read your first 3 sumac letters. I cannot let them go unanswered, though I fear to write without knowing what comes next. I taste the letters still, they linger, they undermine all other flavors, pipe them full of you. Perhaps I'll ask a question answered later, perhaps I'll write a sentence that offends. But if you hunger, I swell. You have me watching birds, and though I don't know their names like you know them, I have seen small bright singers puff before they trill. That's how I feel. I sing myself out to you, and my talons clutch the branch, and I am wrung out until your next letter gives me breath, fills me to bursting. I miss you in the field. I miss defeat. I miss the chase, the fury. I miss victories well earned. Your fellows have their intrigues and their passions, and now and again a clever play, but there's none so intricate, so careful, so assured. You've whetted me like a stone. I feel almost invincible in our battle's wake. A kind of Achilles, fleet-footed and light of touch. Only in this non-existent place our letters weave do I feel weak. How I love to have no armor here. You wish you could hold me at knife point again. You do, still, in a way. So long as I bear these last 3 seeds in a hollow behind my eye, you are a blade against my back. I love the danger of it. Besides, I am not so naive as to think your posting to this strand entirely lacks purpose. Your garden works slowly, works through lives, it burrows you deep, and through you wreaks great change. And through you wreaks great change, while we strive upon the surface. And in your absence, you are deadly as a blade. Lacking letters, lacking the tremors of your footsteps through time, I seek out your memories. I ask myself what you would say and do if you were here. I imagine you reaching over my shoulder to correct my hand on a victim's throat, to guide the braiding of a strand. I am being watched. The shadow, my seeker, steals after me. I glimpse it in the purplish gloaming, but where I chase it, it is not. Smells, hard to say, though hints of ozone and burnt maple. It takes many forms. I worry it is just a phantom, a consequence of my breaking mind. I had hoped to catch it, kill it, prove myself sane, or not, before consuming your next letters. I cannot endanger us, endanger you, any further. But I am the songbird running out of air, and I must breathe. I dream. They've freed us from our sleep as from hunger, but I like exhaustion. Call it a kink or what you will, and in my work up thread, it's often convenient to impersonate humanity. So I tire myself with work, and I sleep, and dreams come. I dream of you. I keep more of you inside my mind, my physical, personal, squishy mind, than I keep of any other world or time. I dream myself a seed between your teeth or a tree tapped by your reed. I dream of thorns and gardens, and I dream of tea. The work waits. They'll catch me here if I remain. More soon, after I've put the shadow to bed, after we're safe. Yours, Red. So Red then continues to chase the shadow that is chasing her, and she's alone. Like, she feels so utterly alone with Blue being gone and not having more letters from her. She's completely overwhelmed by this. When she comes to a halt, she feels a hand on her shoulder. It's the shadow, it's the seeker, like the person, thing, whatever being, entity that has been chasing her. They get into an all out brawl. Ultimately, the shadow ends up getting away, though. And as a coping mechanism, I guess, of sorts, Red decides that she's going to eat the rest of the letters that Blue has written her. She gets her little seeds from behind her eyeballs and consumes them. So in Blue's next letter, she says, Dear Strawberry, you say my letter found you in a moment of hunger. How to say what it means to me that I might have taught you this, shared it somehow, infected you with it. I hope it isn't a burden at the same time that I want you seared by it. I want to sharpen your hungers fully as much as I long to satisfy them. One letter seed at a time, I want to tell you something about myself. Something true or nothing at all. Oh my God. Dear Raspberry. It's not that I never noticed before how many red things there are in the world. It's that they were never any more relevant to me than green or white or gold. Now it's as if the whole world sings to me in petals, feathers, pebbles, blood. Not that it didn't before. Garden loves music with a depth impossible to sound, but now it's songs for me alone. Alone. I want to tell you about when I learned that word. Really, with all of me. The reason I'm a tumbleweed, a dandelion seed, a stone rolling until she's planted in place and then kicked up again, regrown. I think you know. Seeds planted, roots combing through time, until garden repots us in different soil. Our seeding points are so thoroughly embedded that what I mentioned before about approach is inconceivable. Garden goes to seed, blows us away, and then we burrow into the braidedness of time and mesh with it. There is no scouring hedge to pass through. We are the hedge, entirely. Rosebuds with thorns for petals. The only way to access us is to enter garden so far down thread that most of our own agents can't manage it. Find the umbilical taproot that links us to garden, and then navigate it up thread like salmon in a stream, which, if any of you could do, would mean we were vanquished already. If you had that kind of access to garden, you could raise our whole shift. I can't, and I shouldn't tell you this. In spite of all, I keep thinking, this could be such a long con. This could be the information you wanted all along. This, but does it matter? Really? The point of no return was a millennia from now, kept folded up small and tea-scented in a subcutaneous sac I grew beneath my left thigh. Not exactly a locket full of hair, but no reason that should be less grotesque to the disembodied, I suppose. Anyway, I never mentioned. I think the strand in which Garden planted the seed of me, to begin my life with the beginning of life, feels absurd to such as us, doesn't it? But it wasn't anything special. Strand 141's albic parts in the same year as the death of its chatteron, though I beg you not to cast my horoscope. When I was very small, still just barely a sprout of garden rooted through a 5-year-old girl, I got sick. This wasn't unusual. We're often deliberately made sick, inoculated against far future diseases, dosed with varying degrees of immortality, whatever it takes to make us into what we need to be when the garden releases us into the wholeness of the braid. But this was different. This wasn't Garden infecting me to strengthen me. This was someone infecting me to get at Garden. This should have been impossible. I was enmeshed, but somehow, I was compromised by enemy action. It has the quality of a fairy tale to me. I was sleepy, in that space between dream and waking when one can't be certain whether what one's seeing is real or a storm of nanites rewiring your synapses. I had to deal with that once. It was unpleasant. I hope you never have to electrocute yourself to burn bugs out of your brain. Then again, maybe that's covered in basic training for your lot. I remember a kiss and something to eat. It was so kind, I couldn't fathom it as unfriendly. As a fairy tale gets, really. I remember bright light and then hunger. Hunger that was turning me inside out. Hunger in the most primal way imaginable. Hunger that obliterated every other thing I couldn't see. I was so hungry I couldn't breathe, and it was like something was opening up inside me and telling me to seek. I think some part of me must have been screaming, but I couldn't tell you which. My body was an alarm bell sounding. I turned all of myself toward Garden to be fed, to stem this, to stop me from disappearing, and Garden cut me off, which is standard operating procedure. Garden must endure. Garden can, does, has, will, shed pieces, always. Cuttings, flowers, fruit, but Garden endures and grows stronger again. Garden couldn't let the hunger reach beyond me. I understand that now, but at the time I had never been so alone. And I think of you, making that aloneness for yourself apart from the others as a choice. But for me, I was only my own body, only my own senses, only a girl whose parents were running to her because she had a bad dream. I touched their faces and they were mine. I touched the bed I was on, smelled apples stewing somewhere outside. It was as if, in my own small way, I'd become Garden. So me and my wholeness, me and my fingers and my hair and my skin, whole the way Garden is whole, but apart. The hunger simmered in me for a week, during which I ate so much my parents whispered of eggshell stews and hot pokers. I learned to hide it. And then, after a year, Garden took me back, grafted me back on as if we had never severed, probed and peered and sorted through me, doused me in medicines and protection, scoured me inside and out. Nothing was found. My maturation had been sped up oddly, perhaps, but that was all. And after some keen scrutiny during the next few years, the fears that I had been compromised were mostly laid to rest. Nothing in the braid suggested corruption beginning from my strand. Important, too, to broadcast that the attempt at penetrating enmeshment had been unsuccessful, though it had succeeded. But as they never tried again, Garden's gambit there must have convinced the relevant parties. So Garden deployed me, made much of me, praised and elevated me, but always at something like arm's length. My eccentricities are tolerated, my love of cities, of poetry, my appreciation for being rootless, for being, in some ways, more gardener than garden or gardened. My appetites, that being flooded with the garden, can't seem to satiate. You, though, read, and that ends the letter. The next letter says, my apple tree, my brightness. Sometimes when you write, you say things I stopped myself from saying. I wanted to say, I want to make you tea to drink, but I didn't. And you wrote to me of doing so. I wanted to say, your letter lives inside me in the most literal way possible, but didn't. And you wrote to me of structures and events. I wanted to say, words hurt, but metaphors go between like bridges, and words are like stone to build bridges, hewn from earth in agony, but making a new thing, a shared thing, a thing that is more than one shift. But I didn't, and you spoke of wounds. I want to say now, before you can beat me to it, Red, when I think of this seed in your mouth, I imagine having placed it there myself, my fingers on your lips. I don't know what this means. This feeling like being cut off again. In the strangest way, feels like teetering on the brink of something that will unmake me. But I trust you. Take these years of mine, take these seeds, and let them grow me something similar in reply. I miss the length of your letters. Love, Blue. Sorry. Yet again, I cannot reiterate this enough. How beautiful all of this is. And none of it makes sense. I get that. And it's all so poetic and flowery and purple language, or like whatever people call it these days. But like, this is like the most beautiful love story. I can't can't express it enough. So Blue finally finishes her time on this particular strand, like being married to these people or being married to this person. And in response afterwards, she's celebrating with Garden. Garden is congratulating her on what she has done. And it's cool and beautiful and everything's great. But of course, all she can think about is Red. And when she finds Red's next letter, it's more beauty. And in this particular letter, Red admits that she loves her. And I'm just going to read it because fuck it. I've read so much stuff anyway. I'll just keep going. Dear Blue, I wish I could see your triumph, knowing something of the nature of your embedment. Having committed the beat of your footsteps to my heart, I sense the change you will wreak upon us. The season turns. You will be free from your recovery and from your task. I'll be sent, no doubt, to undo the damage that you've caused, and we'll run again, the two of us, up thread and down, firefighter and fire starter, two predators only satiated by each other's words. Do you laugh, sea foam? Do you smile, ice, and observe your triumph? Sapphire flamed phoenix risen, do you command me once again to look upon your works and despair? I distract myself. I talk of tactics and of methods. I say how I know how I know. I make metaphors to approach the enormous fact of you on slant. I send you this letter on a falling star. Re-entry will score and test it, but it will not melt away. I write in a fire across the sky, a plummet to match your rise. Your praise cuts me. Because though I speak so easily of certain things, though I rush through ground that to you seems mind, it's only earth to me. Hold on, I'm going to reread that. Your praise cuts to me, because though I speak so easily of certain things, though I rush through ground that to you seems mind, it's only earth to me. But your last letter, I am so good at missing things, at making myself not see. I stand at a cliff's edge and hell, I love you, Blue. Have I always? Haven't I? When did it happen? Or has it always happened? Like your victory, love spreads back through time. It claims our earliest association, our battles and losses. Assassinations become assignations, like assignments. There was, I am sure, a time I did not know you. Or did I dream that me, as I've so dreamed of you? Have we always fulfilled one another in the chase? I remember hunting you through Samarkand, thrilling to think I might touch the loosening strands of your hair. I want to be a body for you. I want to chase you, find you. I want to be eluded and teased and adored. I want to be defeated and victorious. I want you to cut me, sharpen me. I want to drink tea beside you in 10 years or 1,000. Flowers grow far away on a planet they'll call Cephalus, and these flowers bloom once a century. When the living star and its black hole binary interconjunction, I want to fix you a bouquet of them, gathered across 800,000 years, so you can draw our whole engagement in a single breath, all the ages that we've shaped together. I veer rhapsodic, my prose purples, and yet I don't think you'll laugh, or if you do, the laughter will delight me. Maybe I've overread the simple word in which you chose your letter, but I can never overread you, and the word you chose is not simple. Maybe I overstep your bounds, and to be honest, love confuses me. I've never felt this before. I've had joy in sex, I've had fast friendships. Neither feels right for this, and this feels bigger than both. So let me say what I mean as well as I can. I sought loneliness when I was young. You've seen me there, on my promontory, patient and unaware. But when I think of you, I want to be alone, together. I want to strive against and for. I want to live in contact. I want to be a context for you and you for me. I want to be a context for you and you for me. I love you and I love you and I want to find out what that means together. Love, Red. Bro. Next thing Red knows, she is summoned to a battlefield. At one of the head tents, the commandant is there and she summons Red. She appears. The commandant shows her a photo of Blue and says, "Do you recognize this person?" Red tells the truth. She says yes, and tells her boss, her commandant, about the first time that they met, like the first timeline that they ever came across each other forever ago. The commandant then turns the photo around and shows like the timelines, the intersecting timelines of where Red and Blue have ran into each other or like overlap. The agency, Red's boss, believes that Blue is in the process of grooming Red and has been following her and stalking her and is waiting for Red to engage and like start a conversation. And that the intent is that Blue has always been trying to kill Red. Crazy concept. When Red goes to leave, she freaks out. She's like jumping timelines, ends up in the woods, I don't know, wherever it is, and a bumblebee comes, sits upon her hand, and it stings her. And in stinging her, the bee leaves a message. When the bee dies, obviously, you know how they are. The bee falls off of her hand, falls onto the ground, and dies. A spider eventually comes, weaves up the bee into the spider web, and then consumes it. And then the seeker comes and eats the spider. Okay? But the letter that the bee's stinger left in Red's palm is as follows. Blue says, "My heart's own blood. I dance to you in a body built for sweetness, a body that tears itself apart in defense of what it loves. This letter will sting you when it's done. Let it, and read a postscript in its death throes. I dance. This will be a very boring letter because this thing in me, this piping heat, this rising sun that hardly fits in the sky of me won't stay put. To know you my equal in this too, this beat of my blood's drum, this feat that won't diminish no matter how I ravage it. Red. Red, red, red. I want to write you poetry, and I am laughing, understand, as I teach this small body my joy, laughing at the joke of me and the relief of being supine on a stone slab with a knife above me and seeing your hand and eyes guiding it. Okay. Red, I love you. Red, I will send you letters from everyone telling you so. Letters of only one word, letters that will brush your cheek and grip your hair, letters that will bite you, letters that will mark you. I will write you by bullet ant and spider wasp. I'll write you by shark's tooth and scallop shell. I'll write you by virus and salt of the ninth wave flooding your lungs. I'll stop here. I'll stop. This is probably not how this is done. I want flowers from Cephalus and diamonds from Neptune. I want to scorch the thousand earths between us to see what blooms from the ash so we can discover it hand in hand, content in context, intelligible only to each other. I want to meet you in every place I have loved. I want to meet you in every place I have loved. I don't know how it's done between such as us, Red, but I can't wait to find out together. Love, Blue. P.S. I write to you in stings, Red, but this is me, the truth of me as I do so, broken open by the act in the palm of your hand, dying. I'm just going to read you this again. I write to you in stings, aka a bee that dies, Red, but this is me, the truth of me as I do so, broken open by the act in the palm of your hand, dying. My love will hurt you, but I will love you so painfully that it will kill me. Jesus Christ. Okay. All right. Yep, that's cool. In the following chapter, Blue is talking to Garden, and Garden is revealing, hey, we know that the agency knows that you're an agent and they're coming after you. Like, we think that there's something wrong and we want to like pull you off of these missions because you're going to get hurt. Blue says, I'm not going back to the garden. Like, it's kind of weird. Again, all of these like nouns versus proper nouns versus whatever. It's very confusing, but she's talking to her collective boss, pretty much saying, I'm not going anywhere. I don't want to go back to like no man's land, just kind of living in the mass. Like, I want to continue being my own person. What happens will happen, essentially. In doing so, eventually Blue comes across Red's letter. Red's letter says, hey, they know everything. Not everything, not yet, but they know you, your hammer blow, your trap, your triumph, your emergence. You hurt them bad and they won't let you have another shot, not ever. They know you're trying to talk to me. They're going to use my next letter against you. Please, for the love of God, I love you so much. Do not read the next letter that I write you. Red says, I love you so much that like we can't talk anymore. We have to give up on this. We will meet on the battlefield. We can continue chasing each other forever, but do not ever read anything I ever send you again. Which makes me want to cry. Even saying it out now. Your letter, the sting, the beauty of it, those forevers you promise. Neptune, I want to meet you in every place I have ever loved. Listen to me. I am your echo. I would rather break the world than lose you. I see one solution. It should be easy. Let me go and I'll let you. I will write their letter. I'll send it. Do not, under any circumstances, read what you next receive from me. When you do not die, they will see the gambit's loss. Perhaps your interest in me was a feint. Perhaps I wasn't ripe for you. Perhaps you spotted the trap before it sprang. Perhaps Commandant was wrong. She has been wrong before, and so have the machines. Just don't read what I send you after this. Don't answer, and we go our separate ways. I hate it. I've never hated before like I hate this. With all you are to me and all you'll always be, we can't just go. We can't just walk away, but I will if it leaves you living. They will watch you and me closer than ever now. We can fight. We can chase each other down through time like we did for centuries past before I knew your name. But no more letters. No more of this. That I should die, fine. I signed on to this war to die. I do not know if I ever told you that before, but that should you die, that you should suffer, that they should unmake you. I love you. I love you. I love you. I'll write it in waves and skies in my heart. You'll never see, but you will know. Hold on. I'll be all the poets. I'll kill them all and take each one's place in turn, and every time love is written in the strands, it will be to you, but never again like this. I will kill the poets. Hold on. That might be the most beautiful thing I've ever read in my entire life, which is like so cheesy and stupid, but like, I'll be all the poets. I'll kill them all and take each one's place in turn, and every time love is written in all of the strands, it will be to you. But never like this. I am so sorry. If I had been stronger, faster, smarter, better, if I had been worth you, if you would not want me to curse myself this way, you'll have to burn this. I hope you can keep it. I keep the memory. I imagine your hands on the paper. I imagine your fire. I wish I could hold you. I love you. R. Jesus Christ. In the following chapter, Red is taken by the agency into this lab to like concoct this letter, and they're going to weave the letter into this plant that will grow and have these like crazy red berries that Blue will study and eventually eat, right? That's the entire intent. And then within the letter that they write, there will be a like coded message in the lettering, a cryptography, possibly, as we referenced earlier, that will contain a poison that is specific for Blue so that when she reads the letter, she will die, right? Red goes behind the agency's back and writes even further coded messages within the letter of that is her final message to Blue. Okay, so that is what this chapter is about. As after they finish concocting this message and the agency is happy with what they have created, this seed for this future bloom, they burn the lab down, and within the ashes, Red finds her final letter from Blue, and it says, "Dear Red, as you wish, be." Okay. In the following chapter, Blue is watching a play, and she is watching Romeo and Juliet. If Blue were a scholar, and she has played one enough times to know she would have loved to be, she would catalog across all strands a comprehensive study of the worlds in which Romeo and Juliet is a tragedy, and in which a comedy. It delights her, whenever visiting a new strand, to take in a performance not knowing how it will end. She is not delighted now. She watches the performance with all of the tense fervor of waiting prophecy. She leaves before it ends. Okay, she goes back to her shop as a little scientist lady, and it's the plant from the agency. It has grown and it has bloomed, and she looks at it and it is beautiful. The letter is beautifully composed and she knows what it is, but there is like this underlying calling to her to consume it, even though she knows better. She knows that it is poison. She knows that it is not red. She knows that it is not good for her. But eventually she cannot give up. And so she consumes it and she begins to write a letter in response to Red. But what is the letter from Red, you ask? Blue, I mean it. Stop. I love you, but stop. Don't read this. Each word is murder. Dearest Blue, beloved Blue, wise, fierce, foolish Blue, don't shrug this danger off as you have shrugged off death and time before. This is no slight sidling risk, no road met random monster, no dragon, no woodland beast, no alien god to trick or outwar. Nothing so kind. These are words made to unmake you and well wrought. You'll have no second coming after this. Put the letter down. We'll have each other still as memories and rivals. We'll confront ourselves in the chase through time as it was when I first learned the shape of you. We can still dance as enemy. Just stop now and live and love and let be. And it's literally just pages of Red begging her to stop. Red signs off a letter, and then she says, "And yet you're still here, aren't you? Immune to my ruses, Indigo. I hoped you would leave and save yourself, but you remain. I think I would too. I hope I would be that brave if you are, that we each would give up as much to read each other's last few lines written in water and forever. I love you. If you've come this far, that's all I can say. I love you, and I love you, and I love you on battlefields, in shadows, in fading ink, on cold ice, splashed with the blood of seals, in the rings of trees, in the wreckage of planets crumbling to space, in bubbling water, in bee stings, and dragonfly wings, in stars, in the depths of lonely woods where I wandered in my youth, staring up, and even then, you watched me. You slid back through my life, and I have known you since before I knew you. I know your solitude and poise, the clenched fist of you, the blade, a glass shard in the garden's green, glowing world. And yet you'd never fit in mine. I wish I could have shown you where I'm from, hand in hand, the world I set out to build and to protect. I don't think you would have liked it, but I want to see it reflected in your eyes. Okay. I wish I could have seen your braid, and I wish we could have left all those horror shows behind and found one together for ourselves. That's all I want now. A small place, a dog, green grass, to touch your hand, to run my fingers through your hair. I don't even know how that feels, and I'm sorry. No, if we're this far, if you've been this selfish, I did not mean that. I would have fought you forever. I would have wrestled you through time. I would have turned you and been turned. I would do anything. I have done so much and would have done so much again and more. And yet I am here, a fool, writing to you one last time. And here you are, a fool, reading me. We're one, at least, in folly. I hope you never read these words. I sicken to write them. I know how it will hurt you to reach this far. It is always too late to say what must be said. I cannot stop you now. I cannot save you. Love is what we have against time and death, against all powers ranged to crush us down. You gave me so much, a history, a future, a calm that lets me write these words, though I am breaking. I hope I've given you something in return. I think you would want me to know I have, and what we've done will stand. No matter how far they weave the world against us, it's done now and forever. What will I do, sky, lake, what? Bluebird, iris, ultramarine, how can there be more when this is done? But it will never end. That's the answer. There is always us, dearest, deepest blue, at the end as at the start, and through all the in-betweens. I love you. At the end, as at the start, and through all the in-betweens, I love you. Red senses that Blue has read this letter. She rushes through the timelines to find her, and she finds her dead, clutching a handwritten letter to Red, and on the envelope, it is Red's real name, like her actual name. Obviously, Red is a code name, Blue is a code name. It is written in Red's actual name that Blue should not know. She takes the letter, she's heartbroken, and she makes a run for it. The agency's after her, the garden is after her, trying to clean up this mess. And she runs and runs and runs. She reaches the end of the earth, right? She gets to this cliff. She reads the letter from Blue. She senses the seeker behind her, finding this one last piece of blue in the world. She hands it to the seeker willingly, doesn't fight, doesn't do anything, doesn't burn the letter, just reads it, consumes it, hands it to the seeker, and throws herself off the edge of the cliff. She holds to her despair as rocks streak past and other rocks approach, and the sky's a ruin of bombs, but at last breath before the impact, she breaks. This is too good for her. Too easy, too quick. Blue wouldn't grace her with a death this clean, and she's always been a coward. Weeping, cursing, broken, a hair's breadth from the rocks, she slips away into the past. So what is Blue's final letter, you ask? It is basically saying, I'm passing away and I was a little disappointed in you for giving up so easily, but I understand and I would have done the same to protect you. I loved you. That was true. With what's left of me, I can't help but love you still. This is how you win, Red. a long game, a subtle hand played well. You played me like a symphony, and I hope you won't mind my feeling a little proud of you for such a magnificent betrayal. I see you now as the red hourglass on a black widow's back, measuring out my life in cooling blood. I imagine you coming upon whatever will be left of my body, spinning your nanite shrouds to break, learn, consume my remains. I expect it to be exhaustingly tidy, boring, even. I certainly hope I'll be dead by then. The pain truly is excruciating. It's wonderful, really. Is this what it's like to not feel hungry anymore? A lot less work than the other way. Wish I could go back up thread, and I think this is it. I need to keep strength enough to seal this. What would Mrs. Levitt say otherwise? Or Bess or Chatteron? Thank you, Red. It was a hell of a ride. Take care, my Yewberry, my wild cherry, my foxglove. Yours, Blue. Red continues doing her missions, feeling sad, feeling the loss of Blue, trying to outrun the garden's agents, and truly would unalive herself if it didn't feel so cowardly after what Blue had suffered, right? She goes to hide in a subway at some point and she sees a painting that reminds her of Blue, and this gives her the idea that she will go through time and collect every little bit of Blue that she has ever interacted with. AKA, Red becomes the seeker. The idea is if she goes through time and collects these little pieces of Blue and consumes them, she will become enough of Blue to be able to infiltrate the garden and help Blue survive the poison. Okay, you become enough of somebody to get through the wall, and then you go and figure some other stuff out. Okay, it's crazy. The idea is wild, but Red has no other choice, right? She's a fugitive. She's also being targeted by the enemy. She has nothing else. So chapter 23, she comes to this conclusion. You know, she cuts out her little tracking tools from the agency, and she follows herself back through time, becoming the seeker and eating all of these bits of their letters and their engagement and the love and the signatures and everything from Blue. And as she's doing so and reflecting, she's realizing that there were hints in all of the letters from Blue that maybe she knew that this was what would happen all along. Earlier when I freaked out and I was like, "Oh my God, I just realized something." It's like whenever they were doing their PPS thing and they were like, "Oh, this is how we win the Time War." They didn't mean their factions, they meant them. They meant them as a couple, like them as Red and Blue, not the Garden versus the agency. It's them versus them. Anyway, I have like 20 pages left. Let me get through this. So, Red realizes all of this, like kind of all at the same time. So she's going through time and she's like, okay, this is like, I have to figure this out. But she can't decide if that's what they were. Like, did Blue actually know what was happening or did she not? Red can't decide, right? So once she gathers enough of these parts, it's enough to transform her into quote unquote Blue so that she can get through the garden's defenses and gets through this. And then she ends up back in Blue's like childhood memory that she told Red about when she was really, really sick and exiled, approaches Blue as a child. Red kisses her and Blue ends up cutting her lip and drinking the blood. And so Blue ends up drinking the antivenom, the antivenom that would later give her immunity to the poison in which the agency would put in the plant that she consumes. Da 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 da. It eventually saves Blue's life, right? The garden begins to realize that something is wrong and starts to attack her. She makes a run for it. Eventually, she is able to escape and she goes back, like quote unquote home, and she ends up running right into the commandant, into her agency's people, and they arrest her for being a traitor. So Red has done all she can, right? She did the seeker shit. She gathered all the bits of Blue. She found Blue's past. She was able to infiltrate the garden to get to Blue's past. Gave her everything that she could to ensure that Blue could survive the attempts on her life. Gets caught by the commandant. Gets thrown in jail, is tortured repeatedly. They threaten to like take all of her body pieces apart to figure out what she knows and what she learned and how she knows it. And she says, "Do it. Like, I don't have anything to live for anymore. Just do it." In the last, I'll just read you the last chapter in its entirety. A cell is all Red's world. They take her from it sometimes to ask her questions. Commandant has so many, all variations on the basic why and when and how and what. They think they know who. The first time Commandant asked those questions, Red grinned and told her to ask nicely. Then they hurt her. The second time Commandant asked those questions, Red told her once more to ask nicely. They hurt her again. Sometimes they offer pain, sometimes they offer stake and freedom, a word which means something to them, presumably. But when she's not in use, the world's this cellar, this box. Gray walls meeting overhead, a flat gray floor, rounded corners, a bed, a toilet. When she wakes, she finds food on a tray. When they come for her, a door opens at a random point on the curved wall. Her skin is raw. There are hollows beneath it where her weapons used to be. She suspects they built this prison especially for her. They drag her past other cells, all empty. Perhaps they want her to think she's alone. The guard comes for her one morning. She has decided to believe whenever she sleeps is night, whenever she wakes is morning. Absent son, who cares? They drag her down another empty hall. Commandant waits. No pliers this time. Looks tired as Red feels. She's learned exhaustion in their many sessions together as Red has learned fear. Tell us, she says. This is the last time I ask. Tomorrow we'll take you apart and sift the pieces for what we want to know. Red raises an eyebrow. Please. Red says nothing. She does not think about pomegranates. She does not dare hope. All they ever had was a chance. And even if it worked, even if she woke, who's to say she'd come for you? You betrayed her. Red does not think. The guard drags her down the long, empty hall and pauses at the open door. Red, ready to be tossed once more into her small grayed world, looks back. The guard watches her with still and weighing eyes and a mouth twisted to a cruel, clever line. Why are you doing this? Gruff, low. They aren't supposed to talk to prisoners. Red's always been one for small talk, and tomorrow's the end. Some things matter more than winning. The guard considers. Red knows the type. Idealistic but unskilled, hoping to rise through the ranks on dependability. Yet her defection loosened this one's lips. Blue would have been impressed. You broke into garden and out again, and you won't tell us how. So you're not on our side. Why not join them when you had the chance? Sell us out. So earnest. Red was that way once. Garden does not deserve us, neither does the agency. By us, she means herself in blue, wherever she may be, if in fact she is. She means all of them. All the ghosts on the thread dying in the sick old war, even this guard. Red gives her this truth at last. Maybe it will save her life. The guard throws her in the cell anyway. Red hits the floor and skids. She lies still and does not look up. Something rustles behind her. The cell door shuts. All over soon. She did what she could. The guard walks away, boot thud echoing, heavy, measured, slow. When Red looks up, a small rectangle of white paper lies upon the floor. She scrambles toward the envelope. Claws it to her. Her name, handwriting she knows. She remembers the guard's grip on her arm, remembers that voice. Was it familiar? She rips the envelope open with her thumb and reads, and by the second line, her cheeks hurt from the fierceness of her smile. And the letter reads, My dear hyper extremely red object, I didn't know what you would do. I want to explain myself. This self you've saved, this self you've infected, this self was Mobius, twisted with yours in its earliest beginning. I planted your letter. I watched it grow. I tended it in thought of feeding it my blood, rearing a mouth in it through which to speak to you. You said not to read it. The thought of your naivety charmed me in the same breath as the thought of betrayal burned me. It had been one or the other. How could you think that your failure to kill me would result in anything less than your own death? How could you not see this for the test that it was? How, unless you trusted in your conquest sufficiently to know I would take myself off the board for you, prompted by a clumsy show of your pain? Either way, there was only one choice. To protect you. Whatever your intentions. I had to submit to you. It wasn't hard. Truth be told, Red, not reading your letter was harder. When you said you wouldn't write again, when you said that that is the only letter of yours I've wanted to obliterate from myself. If I'm honest, that's part of why I took the bait. to be unmade. That last written over, to be destroyed by you was easier truly than living with what you proposed. Okay, Jesus Christ. I love her. But I'm greedy, Red. I wanted the last word as well as the first. I hope you did not take my reply too hard. I knew you might not be the first to read it. I want you to know I died thinking that if anyone could keep me alive, it would be you. It was, I confess to you here, a smug thought, that I died by my own hand and was raised by yours. You remember I promised you infiltration from my very first letter, dared you to be infected by me. I couldn't know then. I couldn't. And nor could you, how thoroughly you were already inside of me, shielding me from the future. You've always been the hunger at the heart of me, Red, my teeth, my claws, my poisoned apple. Under the spreading chestnut tree, I made you and you made me. There's still a war out there, of course, but this is a strategy untested. What would Genghis say if we built a bridge together, Red? Supposed we reached across the burn of threads and tangles cut through the braids knots. Suppose that we defected, not to each other's sides, but to each other. We're the best there is at what we do. Shall we do something we've never done? Shall we prick and twist and play the braid until it yields us a place down thread, bend the fork of our shifts into a double helix around our base pair? Shall we build a bridge between our shifts and hold it, a place in which to be neighbors, to keep dogs, to share tea? It'll be a long, slow game. They'll hunt us fiercer than they've hunted each other, but somehow I don't think you'll mind. I've bought you 5 minutes to bust out. Instructions on overleaf, though I doubt you'll need them. I don't give a shit who wins this war, Garden or the agency. Towards whose shift the arc of the universe bends, but maybe this is how we win, Red. You and me. This is how we win. This is how they win the time war. Bro, again, it was so beautiful. I don't know how people read that and don't like it. Like I said, unless like I totally understand, again, controversial opinion, hot take, whatever, about feeling stupid about things. I don't know half of what happened or the purpose of it or anything, but like reading it for a third time, I'm realizing more and more how much all of these things are tied together. Everything that is said in every letter is so interconnected. It is so woven together in a beautiful way that I know took time and effort from these writers, on top of the beautiful poetic language, on top of the poignant love story and this idea of like, I don't know, man, it's just so good. I love this book so much. This has been such a long review. I've been trying to do more and more reviews that are under 2 hours, like an hour and a half, because that's what people like. You guys like this? You freaking sadistic MFers. You love to see me suffer and read 1-star books, and you love reviews that are under like an hour and a half, or right at an hour and a half. But I can't help it. I loved this book so much. Oh, it was so good. Please read it. I swear to God. Please comment and please read it and tell me you liked this too. I don't have any other words. I'm just so happy. There's nothing else to say. I don't even want to like self promo. I just want to say, geez Louise, that was nice. It was so refreshing and different and beautiful, and like I got 200 pages of poetry and lesbians. What more could you want? No, but for real, yeah, let me know what you thought. Like I said, I feel like I gave you guys the proper warnings of not knowing what was happening. I highly suggest reading it again, or if you just watch this, to go back and read it so that now that you know what happened, you can go in it with a different perspective. Or if you've only read it once, I hope this review gave you maybe a different perspective knowing what was coming. I don't know, dude. Yes! Okay. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching, subscribing, being a member, anything. I am so grateful for all of you. Y'all are so freaking phenomenal. Make sure you vote in the polls on my profile. I have a community tab. If you go to that, you can vote on what I read next. I have the Etsy shop for these earrings in the description box below if you want to support a little small business on Etsy. They're so cute. Look at these. Dude, literally so freaking adorable. I need to go to bed. It's like 9 p.m. I have to get up at like 5 a.m. Okay, goodbye guys. I love you so much. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.